All right, folks, welcome on back for another fantastic edition of our Traders Talk Workshop. Maybe not such a fantastic Monday, at least. Great to have all of us back. Otherwise, inside our live trading room, great to have Kathleen, Lynn, and Randy, Bill, Gillis, Margaret, all of our students and members alike inside our live trading room. Let me actually get my screen sharing. That's the only thing I'm slacking on right there. There we go. I caught that early. Now, otherwise, if you're joining us on YouTube, Facebook Live, all of our social media streams and handles alike, let me get this up for our students at least first here. Obviously, what I meant by not such a fantastic Monday for you is, looking at the way the markets are moving right here, right? So once again, another red day. Once again, another day with lower highs, pulling back. Looks like the SPY wants to break lower here coming up. So with that in mind, there is a lot here to talk about, pun intended, our workshop here, Traders Talk. So at Cyber Trading U is the handle, just on the lower left, popping up right there in blue, at Cyber Trading U. If you're new to our YouTube, social media streams, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever it may be. Now, with that in mind, though, let's obviously dig right into the market here. So pretty much we're going to go right back to where we were just about 6-7 days ago. We do this workshop every single week. Back on Tuesday, we most recently met here, and this is where we were discussing this exact test of support, not just off of this horizontal support line here, but even off of this downtrend line here that was building back off the Trump election, victory, and ended up seeing the markets gap up then. Well, of course, we filled the gap since then. We did that actually back since mid-January, pushed back up. But now, from the end of last week into today, we are now at this support level. So don't believe me? Well, actually, just about 6 days ago, we were here again. Traders Talk is a workshop conducted live every single week. It's recorded, but this is last week's edition of Traders Talk. Check this out. Actually, I'm going to go back to about 24 minutes in because that was right where we're showing support holding here pretty much. If you can't hear me on the YouTube here, I got my video player playing here, but I'm just showing pretty much what we were looking at back from last week, 6 days ago, right? Everything new sound. Yeah, it's probably just playing through YouTube right now, but I'm basically just showing this. This is the last week showing you exactly this, at least, right? What we were covering 6 days ago. Now, obviously, look what happened since. Let me get this back out the way there. But just to show what happened since that time, of course, we've pulled back, but this was a great day trade back from the end of last week. Back from the end of last week, this was a great day trade where obviously the markets pulled back into this area, both of the horizontal support lines there, and pretty much right at that same point, the trend line support that was holding back from November. So from Friday, it led to a great day trade, right? Hey, let me ask Kerry, Franklin, and Randy, Grant, all of our students right now in chat inside our live trading room. I always ask these questions each and every week. We go through it in class, of course. But what time do we normally expect reversals within the stock market? More often than not, what time do we typically expect reversals? Typically 10:30, right? So, okay, when the markets are pulling back here, I'm not necessarily in a buying zone right away. We are making lower highs, and by the time we do pull back here at this point, it is after 10:30. So the markets are trending down a little more at this stage. But this is where I'm thinking, okay, at this point in time, I'm just going to wait to see what happens around this area of support. So that reversal time did take longer than we were anticipating from Friday, but it goes to show, though, like at 9:45, 10 o'clock, I'm not so gung-ho. Markets were pulling back here off of, I think it was unemployment numbers, if I'm not mistaken, Friday last week. But we saw a sell-off going into the open. What happens if we see more sell-off afterwards, right? Ended up leading to a bit of a pullback. But from there, though, that's what led to that day trade bounce, that day trade type of slingshot from that point. Tesla was a nice bounce from there. Obviously, we saw stocks like Amazon make a good. So this provided a great move with the market from Friday. That did not guarantee, at least I'll say, it did not guarantee for us to be out of the hole as far as a long-term drop-off, as far as recession, as far as potential support building over time here. So getting back to the SPY, well, we're now below those two lines, right? This morning, we broke below the first here. Just recently, we flipped the second one into resistance. Not looking too good, quite frankly, right? So the more that we keep nipping and testing, not even just the horizontal, but more so this now, focus more here now. because we already started to kind of hold support, which is good. We came down to it again. All right, I guess it bounced. That's good to see, at least the reaction. But the more simply that we are testing a big level in a smaller time frame, that's where I'd feel more prone for it to break. Now, here's where I'm talking about more times in a smaller time frame. So obviously, from Friday into last week, ended up making a great bounce, closed way over that trend line here this morning, and not so much, right? What do we have this week, folks? For any of us here on YouTube, social media, Facebook Live, certainly for you to answer as well. If you're inside our live trading room, what economic events are happening this week at least? We got back-to-back weeks with huge events happening. But what's the first? What's coming up this week at least? What do we got? Don't have my CTU mug at least. Sam saying CPI numbers. Yep, absolutely. That is it. The inflation numbers, the CPI numbers that are supposed to come out this week. I think on Wednesday. I might get the weekday wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong there. Wednesday, perhaps. But either way, CPI numbers out this week. If they're bearish or even slightly bearish, I could see this trend line just snapping. It's already broken below it today, of course, but I mean like talking long term snapping. It might look to make a simple under and over. It might look to close under it on one candle. Then perhaps tomorrow, quick little recovery. Then hey, what if CPI is good? Pops back up. That's obviously in play. I'm not ruling that out. But Wednesday, Sam says correct. Okay, good. And then how about the week after? We're not out of the hole just yet, even if we do get a small little bounce here, because we don't know these numbers ahead of time. We have the CPI numbers out this week. What else is coming out though next week? What do we got next week, folks? Got to be in tune with the economic calendar at least, week to week otherwise. But Sam says something is coming out this Friday. Perhaps, as far as like the big things though, like the real big, even from last Friday, what was it? Like unemployment numbers. Those are important. Those are important. And next month, they're even going to be more so because if you heard Fausto in the morning meeting today, him talking about how obviously a lot of the federal jobs are being cut back. So those numbers are going to be up heading into next month. But what do we got next week, folks? We got the big Fed meeting, Federal Reserve meeting, FOMC. So, of course, we got our main man, main event, Jerome Powell, we nickname him, Bill. Yeah, we got Powell talking. Who knows what he's going to say? So even if the numbers are good or the rates or whatever, he might say something that is more bearish long term, and that spikes the market even down further. So trust me when I tell you, we are nowhere near out of the hole yet, especially with this pullback today, especially with what is obviously coming out ahead throughout this next couple of weeks. So where is our next support? Where is our next big support level here on this graph or SPY? Because we were talking about 567, 565 for a while. Carrie and Alicia, a bunch of us were with us from the end of last week. As far as like a horizontal support line goes, this looks pretty good. It was building back from July, but even more so from like early September. So this is probably right around 540, $540. Not a guarantee it's going to drop immediately there, folks. It might be like a slow burn down there to that price. What they used to say during the COVID times, a soft landing. It might be a soft landing to get to that price. Who knows? But obviously, we'll see what happens in the coming days. First with the CPI number, then of course next week we got the Fed meeting. Now I'm going to jump right back to that YouTube video there, perhaps actually. So if you're inside our live trading room, you may not be able to hear the video I'm playing. I'm trying to show at least what we were discussing from last week. It's just basically what we were covering with the SPY and what we were covering with Bitcoin at least. But let me pull this up here right now, not just for the SPY, but obviously Bitcoin. You know how bullish I am long term on Bitcoin. I was hoping for 125,000 from the end of February. Did not get that, obviously. Now, this is what we were discussing though from this time last week, from Tuesday it was from last week. Let me just jump to this here pretty quick. Pop this up. Basically just discussing the threat of us dropping off quite a bit more from the stage, from right around 90,000, 95, 91,000. Just, hey, you know how bullish I am? But from last week, a week ago in this workshop, it's exact, basically just seeing this 91,000 line break. Um, Basically just discussing the pop and drop that we had off of whatever Trump poster was from the beginning of last week, even. So we popped up, but the sheer fact that we pulled back as hard as we did on this red candle, it was dejecting. 1,000 there, discussing the break of that as support. Then from there, what happens when we see anything break as major support? We're going to expect to see that flip in return as major resistance. So with that, no surprise now that we've seen this drop off a hell of a lot more. We're below 80,000 now in Bitcoin. I told all of our students, all of our members, I texted Fausto as soon as I freaking did it. I said to him, I sold my Bitcoin. I texted Rich, one of our instructors and my colleague here, just told him immediately. This was before I had the chance to tell our students. So basically, there you go. A little text conversation with me and Fausto from Thursday. It was Thursday night. But that's just where otherwise, if we're not breaking higher, hey, there's only one other way we're going, and it's not in our direction, unfortunately. So at this stage now, what is next? Well, much like we were saying before, with support flipping into resistance, perhaps we see resistance flip into support. We were already chopping around these areas back from the beginning of last year before the halving even took place. But more or less, just that we had resistance from the previous all time high. What is that, right around 69,000, 68,000? I don't know if we're going to drop that low. I don't know if we're going to drop that far down because even as we chopped around there back from the beginning of last year, we broke new all-time high at least. And if we could flip that resistance into support next, that seems to be right around 73, 74,000. That would be pretty logical in this case now, at this point in time now. It's going to be a little while before I start turning a lot more aggressively bullish on Bitcoin again, because we're either going to this area or we're going to break back up and above 91,000 at some point. And if we happen to do that, eventually down the line, I'll turn bullish there. It's literally what I said a week ago. I don't mind taking a trade from a higher price if there's more conviction. But just here, though, we're in no man's land. We're in the middle. We're in limbo, basically. I like asking this here from time to time for John S. inside our YouTube stream right now, or Sam or Patrick or Grant, any of our movie fans here. Have you ever watched the movie Inception? You ever see that movie with Leo DiCaprio, Inception? I always remember this because they talked so often about limbo, being stuck in that mental state of mind, limbo. Hopefully none of us ever get into limbo, right? But here at trading, we don't want to be taking trades in between levels, in limbo, right? So at this stage here, again, I'm going to wait for 91,000 to either break as resistance, flip that back into support. Maybe something builds in between. Something might build in between here, but it's going to take a lot of time for me to feel trustworthy of that area or that level. We have pre-built levels already here, right? So what happens when resistance gets broken through? The hope would be on a retracement for that to flip into support. So I feel very confident at 73.6. I feel very confident about right around 91. I don't feel confident anywhere in between. So maybe check back in with me in a week from now, in 2 weeks from now. There might be better support being built in limbo here. There might be a level for us to use, but don't try and catch a falling knife, because there's a good chance even now at this point that we definitely hit that 73.6 or at least closer towards that area, and we'll see what happens then. All right. Gotta get the caffeine fix in. All right. So real quick, going from bottom to top here inside our live trading chat here from Lynn and Randy saying 3 great words when things are unclear. I don't know. Works well in trading. It's good to accept that, right? And, hey, a catchphrase I used to say a little while back, I bring it up from time to time. The only thing for sure is that nothing is for sure. And if you're unsure, meaning if you're unsure about jumping into a trade, guess what? I think that you should be pretty sure then, because unless if I'm much more confident than not, unless if I'm more dead certain than anything, we could always accept being wrong at the end of the result, folks. I mean, there's no ego with, accepting defeat at the end of it, but we got to at least have full confidence going into the trade. So if we're not sure, if we don't know, guess what? I think that you are pretty sure. Guess what? I think that you do know, meaning that as long as you stick to strategy, you shouldn't be taking trades in between levels, right? So that's a great comment there from Lynn and Randy. Sam saying, I thought with Trump being positive on Bitcoin and Gensler gone, Bitcoin would be bullish. Oh, I definitely thought with Gensler being gone. Oh, for sure. That guy, thank God he's out of the fold at least. Now, with that in mind, otherwise, though, perhaps this was a buy the rumor, sell the news type of moment, because Trump did announce that they had this strategic Bitcoin reserve Obviously them keeping a lot of the Bitcoin, all the Bitcoin that they already have owned. That sounds great. Long term, it sounds nice to hear that the U.S. government is being more open to Bitcoin, right? Oh, it's this new strategic Bitcoin reserve. Look into the details, though. Look into the finer details, though, because where you talk about the markets inflating back from COVID time, where the SPY ran up after 2020, right? Can I just ask for our traders that were with us then, and if you were a day-to-day trader back during COVID, I'm sure there were other factors mixed in, but what do you think was the main reason for the markets recovering so nicely, at least during that time? It's nothing to do with politics outside of the policy that was determined. So it's nothing to do with presidents, left side, right side. But hey, we ended up spiking all the way back up after COVID, ran all the way back up. It's because of what was called the quantitative easing, right? The money printer went burr, right? As they say online, right? Carry QE, absolutely. So that's just where they injected more like money into the market, right? Okay, well, I'm thinking of that in the simple sense of Bitcoin, right? Did the US government buy any new Bitcoin with fresh US dollar bills over the last week? They didn't. They did not. That's the key. If they did, if they said, "Hey, we're going to invest $20 billion into Bitcoin. We're going to buy 2 billion, 5 billion, $10 billion worth of Bitcoin," that would skyrocket. It would instantly pop right away. Or if anything otherwise, it would be sticking, whereas the U.S. markets would be dropping off. My belief is that I think that, and this is just my own belief. Everyone's got an opinion like they do something else that they have, right? So just to say that my belief, at least, is that until that happens, I don't think that we're going to see long term confidence in cryptocurrency compared to the US dollar. I still think the government needs to back the US dollar and at least show that they are confident in that long term. See the euro crashing, right? If they say, screw it, we're going to put a bunch of our US dollars into Bitcoin right now, it might show that they're losing confidence within the US dollar. So that might have larger consequences long term. That's just a thought. I don't have no idea what it really, 100%. There's also a bunch of stuff happening just with different commodity markets out there. Of course, with the Japanese yen carry trade, I think that's still continuing to unfold right now, even as we speak. So there's a lot more to it than you and I even know the smallest amount of. So as far as the charts, at least, we trade the charts. As far as the volume goes, we follow the big money. So that's what we're going to keep our focus on. We could hypothesize, we could think, we could believe, we could watch TV, we could read left side, right side. It don't matter. We don't know. We just got to react, right? We don't lead. We got to follow here in this market. Now, with that, though, again, we got to follow the charts. If it's not breaking higher, then I'd like to think it's only going to look to continue to pull back. If we don't get this slingshot in the coming days, again, we're not nearly, we're dropping now. So we're definitely down in the dumps here today. But, even if we get a small bounce this week, we're not out of the weeds just yet. We still got next week with the Fed meeting. So just take things day by day, week by week. Something very important that Fausto brought up, at least in the morning today, was the sheer fact that this is not a great swing trading market right now. Obviously, it has not been since the administration, January was okay, February was okay. But once the news started coming out with the budget cuts, once things started coming out with the unemployment stuff to be coming out over the next month or two, we saw more of a pullback. Support didn't hold where it could have. And from there, we're back down. But that's just where, as a swing trader, as a long-term trader, at least, this is not a good market for you. If you are swing trading, maybe you could take it day by day and kind of just get out the following day or two after. Don't hold too long. You heard Fausto this morning discuss his story of going from plus 10% in his swing trading account from one night down to +1 or, break even. He had to get out basically and liquidate. So it's a volatile market. That's where it is more emphasized that this is a day trader's market than anything else. So real quick, drink my cup of coffee. I'm going to put it down. Patrick saying, Sailor's positioning to make a $21 billion purchase, apparently. I did see that. I did see that myself there. Good catch. Yeah, there's a chance where he announces that this week, next week, whatever it might be. But otherwise, that's just where even him, though, he's not going to push Bitcoin himself. He hasn't thus far, right? So we need to see institutions. We need to see sovereign nations look to, step up and you know, put a forward foot on Bitcoin. That could be UAE. That could be any other nation. Otherwise, though, Sam saying, "Oh yeah, we talked about that already." Let me just keep scrolling up in our chat board right now. If you're on YouTube, Facebook Live, all of us here just joining us. I see Jonathan J, Jonathan S, got a few of us here just joining us on YouTube. But otherwise, just make sure to follow or subscribe right down below at Cyber Trading U is our YouTube handle. At least we go live here every Monday afternoon. Stream live every morning, at least weekdays, Monday to Friday. But with that there, though, let's keep going through our chat board, though. Let's see. I was jumping around a little bit. I don't want to make sure anyone got ignored. Jeff saying, also Trump predicting possible recession. Was that yesterday? He's being straightforward with the thought of it happening. I don't know if he's predicting it, but maybe he's like just trying to get ahead of the game by saying, listen, if there is one, he kind of prepared people for it. So, that's maybe just where his mind's at. Jeff also wrote from earlier. He watched The Big Short yesterday to familiarize himself with what could be happening with our markets, substituting Trump for the mortgage crisis. Jeff, that's a really good idea. I mean, great forward thinking with you to do that, right? And with that there, I hope my book collection doesn't fall on me right now. Watch this. Oh, I really hope my books don't fall on me right now. If you're on YouTube right now, you can watch this. So this book, I talked to Kerry and a bunch of us about it inside our live trading room recently. It's called Gaming the Market by Ronald Shelton. I bought this a while back. This is like over my head. I always say to our students here, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, the brightest bulb in the bunch. But that book was written in 1997 before the dot-com bubble and busted. So it gives you actually insight to how strong the markets were back then before that crash and where the minds were, what the mindset was back then. So just to kind of go back on past experience, at least, Jeff, that's a really good idea. What he's doing, watching The Big Short. El Salvador still stacking despite the IMF pressure. Yeah, I mean, El Salvador has been permeable the whole time. They're going to always look to buy Bitcoin. They're never going to sell. So that's where even like with them, as long as you know that, when you hear something about El Salvador, I would just like brush it off a little bit because they're just so bullish, like Michael Saylor is. Like if they buy, good. If they don't buy, whatever. They're not always buying every day of the week, right? At least I wouldn't expect them to. But that's just where if you hear them sell, that's bad news. If you hear Saylor selling, which I don't think he ever will, if you hear El Salvador selling, which I don't think you ever will, but if you were to, that would be uber bearish, right? So I just want to make that known. Really quick, I just want to make sure that we have enough time to go through a couple questions that were sent in, at least from earlier. So I'm just kind of thinking of them right now. I got my private chat box open here from one of our platinum students here, Pablo. And I want to go over it basically because, he was asking on it separately. I said, you know what, let me just go over it here in our workshop coming up for all of us here. So Pablo is listening to our Cyber Expo event from last week. Had a bunch of new members join us from our big multi-speaker event from last week. So welcome aboard. Just if you're brand new, Pablo is one of our longtime students, though. Just was tuning in, and basically he was asking how I look for gaps in the pre-market. So I'd asked him at the time if there was a stock that he can just like give me as an example, something I could kind of look at as a quick one-off example here. Let me know, Pablo, just on the last second here if you got something in mind. I'm going to go through a couple of examples, though. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this stock to begin, TRVI, a stock that I guess naturally had a small gap up overnight over the weekend, but it's not as much a gap when you look at this intraday chart, right? This is not necessarily like a gap on the 1 minute graph. There's a trend, there's data, it moved up. There's a gap here, though, right? There's a gap here. So I want to respect that part at least and say if Pablo's referring to a gap on the daily chart for a stock that did move up in pre-market, a lot of times we'll see these, gaps from one close of the previous day to the next candle, the open. You do see gaps get filled a lot of times. I mean, much more often than not, the SPY fills gaps. Much more often than not, Tesla fills gaps, which clearly it did from Friday. It filled the gap here from the Trump win. Now it might even fill this one coming up. I mean, it's definitely in line to fill this gap here now at the stage from late October, right? So the market loves filling gaps, but if you're referring to like a stock in pre-market, one of these high-flying stocks, top percent gainer stocks, TRVI was that at least. It was up 85, 86% early in pre-market. So, uh, what's easy to say is that this pulled back once the market opened up. This actually was a good short. It's easy to borrow on TradeStation, first off. But otherwise, I don't want to just say it's an easy short by just looking at this graph after the fact and just saying, oh, yeah, if you shorted here, you could have covered here. And that's bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, for anyone that teaches that way and just only shows after the fact, I show after the fact, but it's based off of live real-time call outs in our live trading room. So, hey, for any of our students here, I was not discussing this as a short. I wasn't telling you not to, but I wasn't saying that, oh, yeah, everyone should have shorted right from the bullshit. If anyone ever teaches that way and they consistently teach that way, they're fugazi, they're fake. So that is just where, how with using CTU strategy, could this have been a good short? Well, let me ask our students here. For all of our students that join us in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, obviously down the line of our live trading classes, if I'm going to look to short a stock, if I'm going to try and short, my best entries to short a stock, it's directly after what? For all of our students, Lynn and Randy, Jeff, Patrick, I see Bill here joining us, Alex, got Wiz. My best entries to short a stock are directly after what? It's very similar to my reason for buying a stock, just flip-flopped, right? So Sam says breaking through a big level on the way down. Absolutely. Absolutely. Margaret Gillis, yeah, absolutely. Now, here's the thing, though. Is this a good short here? Hell no. Not at all, because the trend here is screaming up. When a stock is going up, for all of our students here, what type of pressure are we seeing more of? Buying pressure or selling pressure? What do we got? The stock is going up, 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 up. What do we got here? Yeah, buying pressure. Sam, Gillis, Margaret, Patrick. Absolutely. So this morning, I was thinking buy. I was thinking, okay, like once we happen to see the stock break through a big level on the way up, that for me would trigger a good buying opportunity. No? So let's find out where our big levels are at least. That comes first. So it's easy to say in hindsight, like, oh, yeah, it became. Yeah, but did you look at MLGO from last week before it dumped off? Did you look at GV from last week before it eventually came back down? You can't just say that in hindsight after. If you're a hindsight trader all the time, that means you're probably not making money real time in the present moment. So that's just where there's losses that come with trading. There's imperfections that come with trading. But above all else, you got to use strategy when it comes to trading. And that's what we're going to show here at least. So yeah, we know it was a good short in hindsight. How could it have been? That's what we're going to do right now. So right away, what I'll do is I'll focus on bookmap levels. Normally, I would look at 50-cent levels, whole numbers. Normally, I would look at 50-cent levels, whole numbers for this right away. Right, Jeff? Yeah, normally. Now, 540, key support. 18K buyer out there since pre-market all the way into the open. That's down there at 540. I'm going to draw a couple different lines here in a moment. I'm just going to plot them in a moment here. I got to write the numbers down. So 540, that was a key level. Okay, cool. Let's go back to these lines in a moment. Let's go back to those orange lines in just one moment. If you look on the far right side of this picture, of this heat map, rather, wording right. If you look on the far right side of this whole screen, this whole window, the column on the far right that says CVP, is there a price level that sticks out to you? Is there a price level that sticks out? It's like, hey, there's a lot of volume traded here. Looking at that volume histogram on the far right side, what do we got? Lynn and Randy, Jeff, Gillis, all saying 570. Sam, 570, right? Bingo, right there. I mean, it sticks out like a sore thumb. I mean, just in terms of volume, buying or selling, regardless, there's a lot of volume right at that price. A hell of a lot more compared to any other price above it. A hell of a lot more compared to any other price below it. Sounds like a big level to me, right? Sounds like a big level to me. So I'm going to put a line at 540 from before. I'm going to put a line also, though, at that 570 right here. Now, let's get back to the lines, though. Let's get back to the heat map now, because aside from that line at 540 here, this is messy. This is tough to read. It's not so easy on the eyes. You got lines popping up, disappearing, popping up, disappearing. Something at 6:45 shows up a little bit before the open, but this is a mess. This is not easy to read outside of those two levels. I mean, can we trust 6:45 here as resistance? It popped up at 8:45 at 8:40 in the morning. It looks like it stayed out there for a little while. The longer it does stay out there for, I would begin to trust it. So I guess it did pop over this line, didn't it? It did break over this eventually. Now, though, the market's going to open up in a moment either way. So I didn't really have full faith in that personally going into the market open. Kind of like seeing that right there. I'm like, okay, I guess this line is 6:45. It was out there for a while. It did break through it. All right. Now, though, when the market opens up, at least, where do we have our resistance right away after the market opens up? We're holding off the first 3 to 5 minutes. We're not trading anything the first 3 to 5 minutes. So in that time, like I'm looking at the opening bell print, I'm looking at where my other levels are. Where do we have big resistance on the heat map, though? From Sam and all of us here, where do we have resistance on the heat map? What pops up? What's a dark red? What do we got? Not just 7, right? We got something at 7, but how about this? At 710. And this is about 38,000 shares here too. So there's a lot more resistance off of that 710 area compared to just 7. Even earlier, actually, right after the market opened up, what I want to do is show this here if I can. Let's go back here. I was at 9:34 in the morning. Rich calling this out at 9:32, right? Both of those icebergs there, and just basically saying it's resistance, R. Not like a pirate R, but R is in resistance. So we have resistance right at least there. Now, are those lines going to stay out there? Do they get pulled? What happens to them? Well, let's go through the regular chart here right now. But what I want to do is I want to plot those levels. 703. 710. We know it dropped off after. We know in hindsight that it was a good short afterwards, at least overall. But could there have been a good buy? Could there have been a good area for this to have been a good buy, a good bounce, whatever it may be? Well, looks like after the market opened up, it tried to break over resistance right away. And it actually popped up pretty nicely on the first candle, blew over the resistance lines here by about like 20 cents. So that is where I'm thinking, okay, it's not just actually a little nip of the level. It didn't just like break over this one line by a penny or that's it. It didn't just break over both of these lines by just a penny or two and that's it. It actually popped over this line by like 20 cents pretty quickly. So that is where I am still thinking bullish. I mean, it's taken off fast. It's now up probably even more than that 85%. So, that's where you're thinking, all right, well, what if this doesn't work out? What if this does pull back afterwards? That's where you obviously have to focus on risk management. But at the minimum here, it's blowing over this resistance very fast by a decent chunk. So I would look for resistance to flip into support at first. And it tried. It tried to right away, right? We're after the first 5 minutes. It's holding over both of these lines to a great degree. But this is where I tell you, though, for this to break through a big level, going up, we're going to buy. But just regardless, when a stock breaks through a big level, we should be getting a big move afterwards. So, yeah, it started off good. Started off like okay a little bit. Where's our next resistance on Bookmap? 750. Okay, maybe it can run up there, maybe make a head fake and false break over 750, back down. Like there could have been the chance for that to happen. Obviously, we know what happened after the fact, though. This did not do that. It didn't run up to 750 and hit that level. It only stayed over 7 and 710 for so long. And once it broke back under that, once it broke a lower low locally, that's where it became a better short trade. So, basically, once this broke through this big level, on the way down, that's where you could focus on a potential short. But it took a few stabs below this area to even get it going. And then from there, of course, it's just to say support that got broken through here. It did flip, rightfully so, into resistance. And that would have been your trigger point. That would have been the sweet spot in essence once it breaks through those big levels on the way down. Now, here in this case, it's underneath this area to begin the morning. So, what do you need for it to do? In order for it to break through these big levels going down, well, it's got to break over them first. So, I'm just saying that as like Captain Hindsight, but I would be thinking bullish at first. And, hey, if it's not going to make that better push, that better pop to make a higher high, to flip the next area maybe into the next support, 750, accept defeat, get out, right? This looked like a great trade to begin the morning. It was obviously most of the trade was from pre market hours, but there could have been room for more. If you tell me no, there couldn't have been, that's where I'll show you GV. You know what I mean? If you tell me like, no, Josh, there definitely couldn't have been room for more there. What are you talking about? It obviously tanked for a reason. Okay, well, let's just go back to just 5 days ago, 4 days ago. Let's go back to GV. Bet you didn't think that there was room for more here back Friday last week, back from Thursday last week, back from Wednesday last week. You know what I mean? So we can't forecast that as a guarantee. There could obviously be room for more on a trade like that TRVI. It was up, what, 70, 80%? That GV was what up, like 1,000%? So seriously, I tell you all the time, like there could be room for more, but when there is not, when the stock does not perform to how we want it to, I have those annoying catchphrases if you've been tuning in, at least even on Traders Talk Weekly. If it's not going to continue to build off of this area and flip this into support, then it's no surprise that this made the move in which it made. No surprise then. Now, where was our next level? Our next big set of levels here was pretty much right around 570, then 540. Well, look what happened. Just straight shot down. It eventually went right into this level. And let me ask for Lynn and Randy, Sam, just seeing a little chat right now. Wiz, Margaret, Grant, scrolling up and down and around right now. What's my best entry to buy a stock? If I'm going to buy a stock and jump in, my best entry to buy is directly after what? You just said it, opposite for a short. So tell me what my best entries are for a buy then. Because, of course, it could be in relation to resistance breaking out. When a stock breaks over resistance, perfect. When it breaks through that big level, going up. That's what I wanted you to answer there, at least, right? Well, that's where here even. Hey, this is support. But if we want this to break through this level going up, well, technically, it's got to break under it first. It's got to dip under it first there a little bit. So whether it just kind of kissed it or just kind of broke under and over by a penny here, the first time it comes down to that broken resistance, I would expect that resistance to flip right into support. It would be the same thing even as this trade here. We'll see. AEON. This is one of like the better day trades I caught from earlier this morning. This was just kind of something that fell into our lap. Wasn't expecting anything really around this time. I was like kind of just on a coaching session with one of our students going through their trade from Friday even. And I'm flipping through and I just see this right at $1. So for this to retest resistance, break over resistance again in a smaller time frame, at the bare minimum, I'm looking for this $1 resistance to flip into support. So it got us a nice run. We got like 15, 16 cents on our coaching call there at the time. But at least even here, it slips under and over, under and over. That's actually what you want to see happen. That's what you want to see. If you're looking for a bounce, you got to be going with the upward momentum at least, though. So in order for that to even happen, it has to break under the level first, then back over. So nice it did it twice, but otherwise, the first test is typically where you feel strongest about that happening. So, all right. So let me go back to TRVI because I kind of fell into a little loop, to be honest with you here, because we talked about Pablo's question about gaps in pre-market. So I want to kind of loop it back to Pablo's question. This, to me, I thought was a good stock to use because there's a gap from pre-market on my daily chart, at least. So a lot of times these high-flying stocks do come back down. Doesn't mean right away, though. Follow the trend first because you don't want to be on a GV trade short on this thing as it's pumping up higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs. So again, that's just where I stress that first. But otherwise, though, if it's not going to break higher, if it's not going to play nice by what we're looking for it to do, then the likelihood of this happening greatly increases. That's where I can go back to GV and it's down now. That's where I can go back to stock like MLGO, popped from the other day or the other week, but back down now, right? Like they all come back down. So that's just based off of this partially filling a gap. Now, I want to make sure I answer Pablo's question in full, though, because you might look at that TRVI and say, well, it wasn't really a gap, at least, though. It actually had movement from pre market here. So there were levels involved. And I agree. Naturally, I agree with that. So that's where we can look at a trade, let's say, like Baba. Use Alibaba as an example more often than not. A lot of the Chinese stocks, a lot of the Asian stocks, just trading Asian markets, they will naturally gap with the U.S. markets going into pre-market hours. So 4 o'clock in the morning hits, there's a gap here, right? And oftentimes there could be even larger gaps than just that. Right here from Thursday into Friday, the end of last week, it's not a guarantee that those gaps are going to fill right away. Again, remember, if we happen to see past resistance turn into support, or if this gap's over previously broken support, and if it tries to hold back over it again, those are things that will come into my mind as a day trader. But overall, though, even using this, just using this as a one-off here, but the more times it kept poking and testing this support level built from pre-market, stabbing it. Well, eventually lower highs. It was a tough one, but by 11:30 in the morning, this broke below it, started filling that gap on the way down. So that at least is a more natural example of a gap using the 1 minute chart, just because a lot of the Asian stocks, whether it's China, Singapore, Korea, Japan, whatever, like a lot of them gap up and down overnight. So Lyndon Randy asking, can you show those Tesla gaps again? What was the time frame? Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to that. So Tesla gaps. What I want to just do is the first one from November. So 251.44 is where this closed before the next morning, right? Before the election was over, before Trump won the election there. So that was at 251.44. Basically, I'm just showing this first because from Friday, from the end of last week, look what happened. This went right into that close price from November 5th, right back up. And yeah, you could say it timed it well with the market and the SPY and that support that we were calling out there. But you might be asking yourself, well, why did this not go into 250 first? $250 likely had this huge iceberg on the bid from Friday, the end of last week. Probably did. Let's see if I can even go back that far, guys. One moment. It's going to take me a while to go back on this. So I'm trying to load all the historical data right now. But point being is that we had this big buy order out there Friday last week at 250. Why did that not get hit? Because we saw this fill the gap and that was holding better. That's more of a Captain Hindsight comment, but definitely it's more forward foresight here if you're aware of the gap to even begin, right? Like as the markets were dropping Friday last week, if you say, hey, there's a big gap here, let's look at the closing price from this candle before it took off. Well, that's where the gap had basically started from. So it filled the gap there. Now we're going to get down to this here. It closed on October 23rd. Well, there's actually two gaps here. Believe it or not. And look at that. It's kind of like a optical illusion almost. But basically looking at this, there's a gap down, then there's a big gap up. Rare occasion where it did not fill that gap really much at all. The first one I'm talking about. Basically hovered here, power earnings gap maybe, and then ran. So pretty much, I'm just going to focus on the one from October 23rd. But you could see it closed 213.65, $213.65. That's where it closed on this candle before it had popped. So why did it pop back on October 23rd? Quite frankly, I couldn't care any less. I really don't. If you want me to shoot from the hip, it's probably because of earnings. Like my guess would be earnings. That doesn't matter now. There is a gap here. That's what matters. It closed here at 213.65. That's what matters. So I'm going to be focused on that. If you have an inquisitive mind, it's, if you really want to know, then you could find out, look up online. For this story, it does not make a difference. So I probably mistyped that level. 65, not 44. But 213.65, that's where I would look to try and see your next area for support because that's simply the next gap that needs to get filled. So, yeah. Let me know if you have any follow-ups on that, though, at least from the first gap. Now, the second one, though, if you want me to look at the other one, really, this one, I don't think it's gonna make as big of a difference if it holds from here, though. 238.77. It already broke below that today. 238.77. It closed on this candle October 10th before it gapped down. So again, I don't know why it gapped down this day. Maybe they had underperforming deliveries, but that was right around 238 and change. So, that's where I could at least tell you it held support here at first. The more it kept getting poked at throughout the course of the day, lower, right? That's easy to say in hindsight, but it's easy to say that because it's literally what I have in my head 24/7 as long as the markets are open. The more times the stock is peppering and testing and nipping and testing that level in a smaller time frame, it is more prone to breaking. So it tried it here, but then held. Okay, maybe it could bounce. Nope, came back down. It failed to make a higher high. And then from there, the more it kept testing it here, it just broke at that stage. So real quick, let me just go through my inbox here. There's a couple questions I want to make sure got answered. So, from Alan, can you please highlight the time and sales during Traders Talk today? And a follow up from him as well. Also, your fastest method for getting in a sell amount after your purchase amount. Alan, are you referring to having your stop set? Like having your stop set or having your target kind of price. There's a big difference with the two. Once I jump into a trade, I got to make sure my seatbelt's set. My seatbelt's locked in, clicked in. My stop order's out there. So I'll cover that here a little bit. I'm going to refer you to a class at least that I teach in phase two though otherwise. But before that, even let's go into time and sales. So I may have been there, right place, wrong time. I set a stop break even here, or maybe like for like a 7 cent small loss. It's on tiny size. But SMCI. Okay. What happened to this today? Well, it did pop at first. It did pop this morning. But right before that even happened, at least, that was kind of out of nowhere. What was the predominant trend of this stock before the markets were opening up? It was down. All right. Well, what are we seeing more pressure when a stock is dropping? Buying pressure or selling pressure? Selling pressure. Okay. So again, I answer that for you because I know you know those things. So I'm just kind of expediting that at least. But that's where we'll say, let's look at bookmap first. Then I'm going to do the actual time and sales, Alan. I'm going to tie it back to the actual tape. But here, at least for SMCI, we had this 295,000 share buyer out there at 38 bucks. You'd figure with a buy order that temporarily creates support. Well, actually, even before that showed up, look what happened here. There was about 60,000 shares on the bid. Showed up for a moment at 37.96. Weird price. And it basically broke it, right? It filled that order and it came back up for a little bit there. What was that at 9:40 in the morning? So let's go through our actual time and sales. Have this loaded up preemptively here, Alan. So checking this out, 9:40 in the morning. All right. So ended up breaking through that order on the bid. That order was temporarily support. But once we have enough selling pressure to break that support, to execute that buyer, to fill them, then you're going to see the stock typically either look to drop right away. Maybe it can make a slingshot. Maybe it can kind of go under and over at first. And that's basically what happens here. This went under and over. It bounced at first. Support did eventually hold like at first here. Went under and over. But the point stands where that order did get broken through initially. And when that order gets broken through initially, going down, we're seeing more selling pressure right then and there. So my thought is the more selling pressure that we have at that area throughout the course of the day, this should not only drop, should not only break support and tank, but that support should get flipped into resistance. So just throughout the morning here, this ended up dropping. The markets were dropping at this point here too. So now here is where we have our 292,000, 295,000 share buyer, but that's huge. hey, to the naked eye, when you see that order and you're not thinking about direction, if you're ignorant to direction, you're going to say, wow, the stock should bounce right from there. This was down to begin the morning. This is dropping down right now. You don't want to catch a falling knife, if anything, first. Now, it broke below this level and dropped off rather fast, though, at least. So that's where I was thinking, at least on my trade. Once it broke under it and it dropped here, this is like well before we started this workshop, I was looking for support to flip into resistance. So it was on the way down here. It broke back under it. And I took my short trade here before we started Traders Talk. I set my stop on this, which I'll answer that part of your question. I set my stop pretty much right away, and I'll show you the mechanics of that actually in just a bit. But the story here goes, I was looking for a short because that's where we had the predominant volume here on this trade. This was breaking support early here. It was breaking support here. So the more red that we see on the time and sales window, I'll start thinking, okay, this stock should totally get crushed and drop off from that area then. The more times it keeps pinning and testing that area as support, let me retract that. The more that it keeps nipping and testing that support level and poking and breaking that support level over time, it's bound to like completely break, bound for a total snap of support. One moment here, folks. Go back into the tape. I want to get the exact sequence here. I didn't get it there in time. Let's see. This. Being a pain in the ass right now. My apologies. There we go. So it's interesting because my time in sales, interestingly enough, to peel back the curtain, my time in sales here shows green, right? It technically shows green. You're not colorblind here, folks. Unless if you are, let me know. But trust me, your eyes are not going, wrong here. This actually is green. Actually is some yellow at first here. But this is where I want you to focus on direction. So the stock was dropping to begin with. It was pulling down towards that price. We're seeing predominantly red and purple. That's the selling pressure I'm referring to. So actually, when you look at this and you say, like, well, what the hell? This is all green here. What's going on? Is this buying pressure then? What's the deal? I don't want anyone to pull their hair out anymore at this, but this is where I'll just tell you, this is basically a glitch. This is supposed to be red. This is supposed to be red. It's going down, down, down. This is actually a down tick here and a little negative here next to the price. This actually should be red. I don't know why it's green. It has to be some formative glitch on my platform. I don't want you to lose confidence in what you're looking at. Is it right? Is it wrong? What am I really looking at here? Look at the sequence and the price. That's first what you want to do. Like, this was dropping going into that order. Like, it shows actually in the direction. So, and not only that, it shows big red dot, big red ball here. So that's truly what I would focus on there. Like, that's the color I'm expecting. So you're seeing the price here going lower, 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 lower. All right, that means you're seeing selling. There's more selling pressure there at that point. You're seeing it obviously in the purple and the red here. So that's where when you see like a larger strip of green or yellow out of nowhere like this, don't think this is buying pressure right away. Just focus on the sequence in which this was kind of moving within. Focus on bookmap, the fact that this order on the bid was there and it broke through that order on the bid. So I'm counting that as selling pressure. And it's actually a good example for us to go through because we can peel back the curtain behind technology and say, our platform, regardless of TradeStation, Interactive Brokers, Fidelity, whatever, there might be imperfections. There might be glitches or little things where it should be red and not green. But that's just where, at least throughout the course of the day, I was there, right place, wrong time at first. I jumped in here as it pulled back before we started Traders Talk. I had my stop set right above me here because I don't want to, be flapping my gums and then for this to shoot up higher and then it's like, oh no, you're down. I don't mind jumping in this trade at a lower price level if there is conviction there. But now at this stage, well, it pulled back under 38 again. One more time, it's under 38 again. All right, if this is going to work out, then guess what? This should be treated as resistance. At the bare minimum, this should be holding as resistance. It's clearly not. It hasn't been over the last hour. So I have no problem getting out where I did just for a dinky like -7 on a quarter size. But now at this stage, hey, what if it moves back up to 38 again? Well, with lower highs, I would be thinking lower low. So as long as you get the reaction off of that level where you see it basically move up, that's a really shitty line, back down. That's what I'd be looking for, at least up and then down, as long as 38 holds this resistance. And if this pulls back more, then I'll look to see what the next level of support is otherwise, or I'll move on to a different stock. But either way, just to tell you, that is why I was focused on a short trade with SMCI, but it was based off of time and sales effectively. Like Bookmap, it really was, but volume, time and sales, Bookmap, they're all related to one another. So at least here, once that order on the bid got broken through, that's really what I was thinking about with selling pressure with red. And I just want to stress again here that this really should be red or purple, one of the two, red or purple. But Alan says, I can't seem to get two order windows with Interactive Brokers to immediately set his sell order. Interactive Brokers doesn't have the color option other than a small green dot besides the time and sales price. Not near as clear as your full colored columns. Alan, my friend, I'm aware. It's one of the few little downsides as a day trader for me. Our style of trading is pretty niche. A lot of trading styles are pretty niche. So with following time and sales, that's the only thing with Interactive Brokers that kind of sucks. Like, there's such a good platform outside of the time and sales. I remember like 5 years ago, I was on coaching with students and they were showing me that time and sales. I'm like, man, that's kind of tough because the font size is really small. That's the font size isn't even that big. It's like really small. So if you got bad eyes to begin with, not good. And then let alone that, like you're saying, it's not really as colorful. Even if you saw the green, the yellow, the red, you don't have that on Interactive Brokers. It's like kind of just really small, microscopic little dot. I know what you're referring to. It's a pain in the ass. Now, as far as the two order windows to immediately set your sell order, that I could work with you on just coaching session. I know that you have a bunch, so we'll talk about getting one scheduled for like this week, next week, whenever you're free, really. But as far as setting the stop order, I could show you from my platform, but obviously it's not going to be as relative to other platforms, unfortunately. But at least on this trade, what I ended up doing was as soon as I got in, I made sure that my order type was first set to stop limit here. And then from there, otherwise, I got to make sure that if I'm going to make sure that my stop for a short trade, I'm on a short trade here. So like that's where I'm saying I would look to have my stop set over my level, not under my level. So I would do this where I would basically click on a price like 38.10, 38.10, whatever. And the key to setting any stop limit order, regardless, like to set your seatbelt, is to make sure that your stop price is closest to your level first. And then from there, your limit price is like, 5, 6 pennies, like not that much, like, 5 or 6 pennies over the stop price. That's for like a short trade to begin with. So give me a moment. Just going to draw here for a second. So for a short trade, here's my level. Here's my entry because I'm shorting under a level. And I would have my stop price right above my level or just, shortly above my level, whatever. And then my limit price right above my stop. You don't want to have the limit price and the stop price the same. You don't want to have the stop plus the limit at the same price level because that gives you a greater ability to have your order getting blown through and have the stock run up without taking your order out. So the key with using any stop order, especially a stop limit, is that you got to go stop order first or stop price, and then limit price afterwards. Mine again, stop price, limit price. Now, again, I talk all about that, though, in specific classes that we teach. We have full 60-minute classes as far as setting your stops go. So setting stops, taking profits. We did that back in January. We'll do that back in April in a couple months from now. Obviously, one-on-one coaching. If you are a gold student, you have a few that you have to work with. If you're Alan, who is a diamond student, you have a bunch. If you're a platinum student, you know this already, but we could even set up a session for like tomorrow or later this week. We'll talk more specifically about your platform, Alan. But this goes across the board for any of our members joining us on YouTube right now, Facebook Live, etc. At Cyber Trading U is our handle on YouTube. But we teach each and every month our live class curriculum here. So it's never a better time to learn than right now. I say, make sure that you're caught up with the class curriculum, if anything. But otherwise, even in a couple weeks' time, we'll be talking about volume mainly throughout our classes. All right, folks. Woof, 105. Went a little over already. I didn't even check the time. All right, folks. Hey, I got to jump off at least here coming up. So, for John S., Jonathan J. on YouTube, I appreciate your attendance. If you're joining us on social media once more, at Cyber Trading U, I'm losing track of all my things right now. There we go. Popping up on the lower left, at Cyber Trading U. Be a friend, tell a friend. Look to hit the follow or subscribe button down below. Again, we do this workshop every Monday afternoon, but we stream live every morning, 9 o'clock Eastern time. 35 plus year pro of the market, Fausto Pugliese, basically, leading the ship there. And, basically, otherwise, outside of the week, the streams in the morning, we're there weekly with podcasts, weekly with webinars, and this workshop on top. So, make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button down below. Otherwise, though, you see there scrolling down below as well. Right there down below, ctu.co/trial. Feel free to join us inside our live trading room at least. Got a bunch of our students and members there right now. Give me a brief moment here. There we go. Grant, Farzad, Lynn and Randy, Margaret, Alan, Gillis right there. I see a bunch of us just joining us from earlier today. So I appreciate all of our students, of course. But if you wanted to learn, just make sure that you join our live trading room. And then that's where we'll have a better chance to field questions. That's where we'll have a better chance to show you basically how everything is pretty much done. Now, before this drops any lower, let's finish up this workshop because I got to get my hands on this short now. It's dropping off without me. So, folks, we'll be back later on this afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, just for the afternoon meeting inside our live trading room. But otherwise, I'll talk to everybody pretty soon. Take care.